英語聞き流しリスニング、英語テキストと MP3 ダウンロード、その他の物語はホームページからお聞きいただけます。88thpp.com 88thpp.com
My last homecoming. 1. In voicemail, there was a message from my father that said he needed to be called back immediately. I was chilled to the bone. I have never received a single phone call from him that's not disturbing. When he calls me, he does it to vent his spleen about his daily life and about my career as a musician. What comes out from the receiver is his lengthy verbal abuse. Nevertheless, I mostly return his call because things get worse if I don't. This time was no exception, and I called him back fearfully with trembling hands. Instead of a spurt of anger, he told me to come home as soon as possible and stay for a few days. I asked him what happened, and he didn't answer that. As his request sounded urgent, I repeatedly asked for the reason. He just dodged and kept saying that he wanted me to come home right away. I hung up and felt alarmed. Something must have happened. Since he had never given me good news, that something was most certainly a bad thing. My parents' home is located in Kyoto, that is 500 miles away from where I live. It takes me over 5 hours to get there by bullet train. I don't have so much free time to take that long trip without the reason. Besides, such an unusual request requires extra caution. I called my mother's cell phone and asked her what was all about. She told me that they had decided to sell their house and move out. They were looking for a condominium to buy and moving in as soon as the house was sold. The house could be sold next month at the fastest, and they wanted me to sort out my stuff and spend time together under this house's roof for the last time. The house was built when I was 9 years old at the place where our old house was torn down because it was too old to live in. That old house was built about 100 years ago. My ancestors lived at exactly the same spot generation after generation for over 1,000 years, since my family used to be a landlord of the area. We are here for around 63 generations or something. My father succeeded the family from my grandfather, and I would have been the next successor if I hadn't left home to be a musician. Because my father failed the family business and didn't have the next successor for help, he had sold pieces of our ancestors' land one by one. Now his money has finally dried up, and he can't afford to keep the last land where the house stands. When my grandfather passed away 9 years ago, my father complained to me again about financial help I wouldn't lend. I promptly suggested that he should sell the house and its land. He got furious at my suggestion. He shouted, "How could you say something like that? Do you really think it's possible? All ancestors of ours lived here. I lived to continue our lineage right here for my entire life. Selling the house means ending our family lineage. It's impossible." He bawled me out like a crazy man, while banging the floor repeatedly with a DVD that I had brought for him as a Father's Day gift. But 9 years later, the time inevitably came. Considering his mad fury about selling the house back then, it was easy for me to imagine that he planned to set fire on the house during the night I would stay and kill my mother and me along with himself. That seemed the true reason why he wanted me to come back. Those murder-suicide cases sometimes happen in Japan, especially among families with long history. But the first thing that I felt at the news was not fear but relief. As I had known my father wouldn't sell the house, I had thought that I would end up reaping the harvest of his mistakes as his daughter, even though I didn't succeed the family. I would have to liquidate everything in the house to pay his debts and sell the house and the land by myself after I would argue with all my relatives in the family's branches who would most likely oppose strongly. That picture of my dismal future had been long hanging low in my mind. But now, completely out of the blue, my father was taking up everything, and I was discharged. I took an enormous load off, but didn't forget to be cautious. As there was still a possibility to be killed by my father, I decided to make my last homecoming a day trip in order to avoid spending the night there.
Audiobook, The Family in Kyoto, One Japanese Girl Got Freedom by Hitomi Woods on sale at online stores or apps. Apple Books, Google Play, Audible, 43 available distributors in total. Audiobook, Japanese Dream by Hitomi Woods on sale at online stores or apps. Apple, Audible, Google Play, Nook Audiobooks, 43 available distributors in total.
英語聞き流しリスニング、英語テキストと MP3 ダウンロード、その他の物語はホームページからお聞きいただけます。88thpp.com 88thpp.com